Hey, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Leave a like and comment below where you're listening from, too. Now take a deep breath and watch until the end if you dare. The night began like any other, quiet and routine. I was on the third floor labor and delivery wing, a ward I had walked countless times before, too. Each step memorized, yet somehow never comforting at night. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above, flickering every so often, casting long, quivering shadows along the walls, too. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the faint, lingering scent of a new mother's perfume, an odd mix that should have been comforting, normal. But that night, it wasn't, too. I had just finished checking the monitors in room 4 when the phone rang, slicing through the silence. L&D, Nurse Malik speaking. I answered. The voice on the other end was tight, too, almost panicked. We have a patient in triage. She says something's wrong with her baby. I scribbled down the details, grabbed my bag, and walked briskly down the hall, too. My shoes clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. When I arrived, the room was empty, eerily silent except for the rhythmic beeping of a monitor that wasn't attached to anything, too. A fresh chart lay on the counter, a patient's name I didn't recognize. No one else was around. That was the first unsettling moment. I called out, "Hello," to anyone here, but only my voice returned to me, bouncing off the walls like an echo of doubt. Then I heard it, a soft whimper, high-pitched and fleeting. I froze. My heart raced, too. It sounded like a baby, but there was no incubator, no bassinet, nothing but shadows stretching across the floor. Following the sound, I felt a cold draft brush against my neck, too. The hall lights flickered again, and for a fraction of a second, I could swear I saw a tiny figure standing at the end of the corridor, just beyond the double doors leading to the NICU. I blinked, nothing. Shaking my head, I reminded myself I was tired. That night shifts played tricks on the mind. Yet something deep in my gut whispered that this was different. I walked to room 7, too, where a new mother had just delivered. She was asleep, exhausted, with her newborn nestled against her chest. Everything seemed normal. Yet, as I turned to leave, too, a tiny hand grabbed my wrist, and I wasn't touching the baby. My breath caught. I looked down, nothing. Again, my mind told me of exhaustion. But then I heard it more clearly, the faintest, too, almost deliberate tapping, like fingernails drumming on the wall. Coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The night wore on, and the ward seemed alive in ways I couldn't explain, too. Monitors beeped when no patient was hooked up, doors opened slowly by themselves, shadows moved against the corners of my vision. I tried to call the charge nurse, but the line was dead, too. My radio crackled with static, and through the white noise a soft, desperate voice whispered, "Help me." By 3 a.m., I was alone in the ward. Everyone else had gone home, too, leaving me with the ghosts of cries I couldn't trace. And then it happened. A sudden, violent scream echoed down the hall, a mix of pain and terror that froze me to the spot. I ran toward it, too, heart hammering, but when I reached room 9, it was empty. No one. Just a bassinet rocking gently as if an unseen hand were holding it. I don't remember the rest of that night clearly, too. Some of it is a blur, a haze of cold corridors, monitors flashing red, and that constant whispering. When the morning staff arrived, they found me sitting in the middle of the hall, too pale and shaking, staring at nothing. There was no explanation. No patient had arrived in triage. No scream had been reported. The bassinet was empty, and yet I knew what I had seen, too, or at least felt. Even now, years later, I can't walk past room 4 without a shiver, too. Without remembering that night, when the ward became alive with something I couldn't explain. Something that seemed to reach out, silently, for help that I couldn't give. By the next night, too, I was reluctant to return to L&D. Every step down that hospital corridor brought back the whispers, the fleeting shadows, the cold brush against my skin. Yet, duty called, too, and no one could cover my shift. As I entered the ward, the fluorescent lights flickered in the same unsettling rhythm as the night before, and I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, too. Something was waiting for me, something unseen. The first hours were quiet, too quiet. Patients slept, machines hummed a standard rhythm, too, and the occasional footstep echoed faintly as nurses and aides went about their rounds. I told myself the previous night had been exhaustion, the mind playing tricks, too. But the moment I stepped into room 4, I froze. A faint chill seeped through the doorframe, colder than the air conditioning could ever make it. On the counter lay another chart, unsigned, unnamed, too. I opened it hesitantly. The patient information was blank except for one line, "Deliver tonight." The handwriting was strange, almost childlike, jagged in parts, yet deliberate, too. I dropped the chart, and it slid across the linoleum floor, stopping abruptly at the center of the hallway, as if something had caught it. Then I heard its soft, wet breathing. I spun around, too. Nothing. Just the shadows clinging to the corners, twitching as if alive. Minutes passed. Or was it hours? Time seemed wrong in that ward. The monitors began to beep erratically, too. Not in alarms I recognized, but in strange patterns. I approached one, and the numbers flashed, 100, 100, 100, counting down, yet never reaching 0. My radio crackled, too. And through the static, the voice whispered again, "Please, don't leave me." I ran down the hall to check every room. Every mother, every baby, every corner, normal. Yet I felt it, too. A presence lingering just behind me, always there, always watching. Then I saw her. A tiny figure standing in the doorway of the supply room, just beyond the nurse's station. I called out, too. "Hello? Are you a child?" The figure didn't move. Slowly, a soft giggle echoed, high-pitched and hollow. I blinked. The figure vanished. Just vanished. I knew something was wrong, too. I knew I was no longer dealing with sleep, deprived imagination. This was real. But it didn't really explain how the ward seemed to shift around me. Doors I had locked opened on their own, too. Shadows pooled in corners before darting into walls, and the faint smell of cologne and antiseptic lingered where no one had been. Then came the crescendo. From room 7, too, where a mother had just given birth hours earlier, I heard a scream. Not just any scream, but one that cut straight through my soul. A baby crying, a mother screaming, a voice screaming for me, too. I ran heart hammering, only to find the room empty. The crib rocked slowly on its own, and the monitor displayed a heart rate of 0. My pulse raced. I reached out, too, and the instant my fingers touched the mattress, a cold hand pressed against my wrist. I jerked back, and the room went silent. The crib stopped moving. The monitor returned to normal, too. I tried to rationalize. Infection control, mechanical error, shadows from a nightlight, anything. But deep down, I knew none of it was normal. The rest of the night spiraled into a blur, too. Every corner I turned revealed fleeting glimpses of something, a baby crying without a mother sleeping while something, whispered into her ear, too. The same static, filled voice repeating, "Please help me." I called security. No one answered. I paged the charge nurse. No response. I was completely, utterly alone. By the morning, too, I sat outside the ward, hands shaking, staring at the sunlight creeping through the hospital windows. Everything appeared normal again. Staff arrived, cheerful and oblivious. Too, no monitors had malfunctioned. No screams had been reported. The supply room doors were closed. The mysterious chart was gone. And yet, in my pocket, I found something I couldn't explain, too. A single, tiny baby sock, damp cold, and embroidered with a name I had never heard, Leela. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was reaching out, specifically to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tiny sock with the name embroidered in delicate script, too, Leela. My colleagues noticed my unease, joking that night shifts turned everyone paranoid. But I knew this wasn't paranoia. Something was wrong, too. Something that had nothing to do with exhaustion or imagination. The next evening, I arrived early, determined to prepare myself. I carried a small flashlight and a notebook, too, determined to document everything. The ward was quiet, deceptively quiet. The monitors hummed normally, the lights flickered only occasionally, and for a brief moment, too, I convinced myself that last night had been an isolated incident. It wasn't. Room 4, the room that had started it all, felt colder than the rest of the ward. The door was slightly ajar, too, and I felt a pull, a magnetic tug that forced me closer. I stepped inside and saw it, the crib, rocking gently, empty, bathed in the dim, fluorescent glow. I approached cautiously, too, and a chill ran down my spine when I noticed faint footprints in the dust on the floor. Tiny, bare footprints leading nowhere. Then I heard the whisper again, Lila. The voice was soft, too, broken, almost pleading. My hand trembled as I wrote the name in my notebook, over and over, as if by doing so I could anchor it to reality. I began searching hospital records, too, poring over old birth logs, discharge notes, anything that might explain the name. After hours of digging, I found a record from 10 years ago, a newborn named Leela, stillborn in room 4, too. The staff at the time had been small in number, and her death had been quiet, almost unremarkable in the hospital's vast history. But for some reason, she had returned, or at least, too. Something claiming her presence had returned, and I was the only one who could see it. The nights that followed became unbearable. The ward pulsed with activity unseen by anyone else, too. Cribs rocked, monitors beeped with irregular rhythms, doors creaked open and shut, and shadows darted just beyond the edge of vision. Every time I turned a corner, I felt a small hand brush against mine. Every time I sat down, I heard the soft patter of tiny feet racing away. One night, I finally confronted it. I stood in room 4, facing the empty crib, too, and whispered, Lila, I don't know why you're here. I don't know what you want. The air shifted. A cold breeze circled the room. And then, clearly, almost painfully clear, too, I heard her voice. I'm scared. I don't want to be alone. I felt tears streaming down my face. I wanted to hold her, to comfort her, to tell her she was safe, too. But there was nothing to hold, nothing but the echo of her presence and the endless cold that filled the room. From that night onward, I realized the haunting was not malicious. It was tragic, too. Leela was not here to harm. She was here to be remembered, to find solace in the living who could see her, hear her, acknowledge her existence. And yet, her presence had consequences. My sleep, too, my mind, my reality, all slowly unraveling as I tried to care for a child who should never have been in my world, yet had become a part of it nonetheless. By now, too, my colleagues noticed my exhaustion. I explained it away as long hours and stress. No one believed the stories of whispers, shadows, or rocking cribs. How could they? No one had seen what I saw, too. No one had heard what I heard. And perhaps that was for the best. But every night I walk past room 4 with a shiver, and sometimes when the corridor is quiet, I hear it soft, too. Almost imperceptible, thank you, and I know, deep down, that the ward has never been the same. Neither have I. The week after discovering Leela's record, too, The ward seemed to pulse with anticipation. Every night, I felt her presence grow stronger, more insistent. The air became heavier, too, thick with cold, and the faint scent of something I couldn't name, a mixture of antiseptic and something long decayed. Machines beeped in rhythms I had never seen, too, and shadows moved independently of the dim lights. I was no longer a nurse on duty. I was a witness to something the hospital itself could not contain. One night, too, I arrived to find the ward in a strange semi-darkness. Only room 4 seemed illuminated, its light flickering as if breathing. I stepped inside. The crib was empty. Yet, too. The soft whisper of a child's voice echoed, circling the room. I don't want to be alone. I could feel her presence pressing against me from every angle, surrounding me, too. I tried to breathe slowly to calm myself, but panic was useless. Then it began. Shadows stretched from the corners, twisting into shapes that resembled small, delicate hands reaching for me, too. The monitors went haywire, flashing red numbers, beeping in unrecognizable patterns. Doors slammed shut throughout the ward. I ran from room 4 into the hallway, but the corridor seemed longer, too, endless, stretching into darkness I couldn't escape. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, overlapping with whispers, cries, and faint laughter, all tiny voices calling my name, pleading to, crying. I stumbled into the nurse's station. Papers flew across the room, charts flipping open to blank pages. My radio crackled violently, spewing static until a single coherent voice emerged, too. La. I froze. It was not the same voice I had heard before. It was stronger, almost demanding. I realized she wasn't alone. Something had awakened with her presence. Panicking, too. I ran back to room 4, desperate to confront the epicenter of this nightmare. The crib now glowed faintly, surrounded by shadows that seemed to wreathe and twist toward me. The temperature dropped, too, my breath visible in the icy air. I whispered, trembling, "Lila, I'm here. I won't leave you." Then silence, absolute, suffocating silence. And in that silence, I saw her, a tiny figure, almost translucent, standing at the foot of the crib. She looked at me with hollow eyes that seemed far too old for her small face. The room felt impossibly still, too, as if holding its breath. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But the moment I took a step forward, the shadows recoiled, stretching toward the ceiling, too, forming shapes of hands, faces, dozens of tiny figures, all trapped in the cold darkness surrounding Lila. She spoke, voice trembling but clear. I can't stay, too. I'm scared." I didn't understand. "Stay. Leave," I whispered. "You're not alone. I'm here." The shadows surged, and suddenly the ward snapped back to normal. The lights were steady, too. Machines beeping rhythmically, doors closed. Room 4 looked as it always had. I was alone, completely alone. I never saw Lila again. The crib was empty, no footprints, no lingering cold, too. The tiny sock in my pocket had vanished. Yet I know she was there. I know what I saw. And I know that something or someone was desperately reaching out, too. Needing to be acknowledged before vanishing. Since that night, I've continued to work L&D, but the ward is different now. There's a subtle chill near room 4. A whisper of movement just beyond vision. I sometimes hear a soft laugh in the corner of my ear, a tiny voice that disappears when I turn to look. I don't know if she's gone, too. If she's at peace, or if she waits for the next nurse, the next person who might see her. Some nights, I wake in my own apartment, feeling the faint brush of a small hand against mine, too. And I remember that night, that ward, and the child named Lila, who refused to remain in silence, who refused to be forgotten. Even now, years later, the story haunts me, too. It never leaves me. It whispers in the quiet moments, lingers in the cold corners of my mind, and reminds me that some cases, some presences, are beyond explanation, too. Weeks passed after that night, or at least they should have. The days blurred into each other, too, stitched together by fluorescent lights and the steady hum of monitors that now seemed far too quiet. I returned to the ward, carrying the weight of everything I had seen, heard, and felt, too. To the outside world, I was just another nurse putting in my shifts, smiling at new mothers, checking vitals, reassuring anxious fathers. But beneath the surface, something had changed, too. I wasn't the same. Room 4 remained the epicenter of the experience, though outwardly nothing had altered. The crib stood empty, monitors read normal numbers, too, and the fluorescent lights hummed their familiar monotone. Yet, each time I approached, I felt it. That subtle chill creeping along my spine, the sensation that someone was watching, waiting, too. My colleagues noticed my hesitancy, the way I lingered near corners, the slight tremor in my hands when I checked on a newborn. I brushed it off as stress, long hours, too. Maybe too many nights alone on duty. But deep down, I knew better. I began noticing small things, subtle traces that seemed insignificant but unmistakably wrong, too. A tiny sock appeared on the nurse's station, damp and folded, always for a moment before disappearing. Soft pattering echoed in the hallways late at night, too. Never when another staff member was present. The whispering voices, faint but persistent, haunted the edges of my consciousness. Fragments of cries and laughter, sometimes calling my name, too. The most unsettling part was that Leela's presence no longer confined itself to room 4. I would feel her beside me in the supply room, hear her tiny giggle near the NICU, sense her small, too, insistent hand brush against mine when checking on patients' monitors. Always gone when I turned to look, always leaving the questions, too. Was that real, or am I losing my mind? I tried to explain it, to anyone, to myself. Logical reasoning offered nothing. Colleagues laughed off my unease, citing exhaustion, stress, too, and overwork. My friends outside the hospital urged me to take leave. But leaving didn't help. Leela, or the memory of her, clung to me like a shadow. Even at home, too. The sensation of tiny footsteps across the floor, or the faint scent of something clean yet decayed would bring me to a frozen pause. Despite the haunting, life went on. I delivered babies, too, comforted new mothers, and offered reassurance to terrified families. Yet the experience had changed me fundamentally. I had seen a boundary between life and death, too. One that hospitals often skirt without acknowledging. I had interacted with something that should not exist in our reality, and I was acutely aware that the ward itself had been, too, if only temporarily, a liminal space, a place where grief, life, and lingering souls intersected. Sometimes, during the quiet night shifts, too, I would sit in the dimly lit nurse's lounge and feel the pull toward room 4. The ward would feel alive again. Faint whispers, shadows in the corners, the subtle rocking of an empty crib, too. I would walk to the door, breathe deeply, and whisper into the empty room, "I see you, Leela. You are not forgotten." For a moment, the chill would fade, the ward would seem normal, too. And I would believe that maybe, somehow, she found a measure of peace. But as I turned to leave, a soft giggle or a fleeting shadow reminded me she never fully leaves. Some presences, too. Some stories are perpetual, and so I continue to work, haunted but vigilant. Haunted by the memory of a child who never truly lived, and yet refused to disappear, too. Haunted by the realization that life, death, and the spaces between them are not always bound by rules. Haunted by the knowledge that in the quiet corners of the hospital, too, in the dim glow of monitors, and in the soft creak of a crib, some spirits linger, seeking acknowledgement, connection, or perhaps just to be seen. The ward never sleeps, and neither, in a way, too, do I, Even now, long after that night, when I pass room 4, I feel her presence, soft, insistent, eternal. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear the faintest whisper, "Thank you."